My name is Alexis, and at the age of 28, my life was marked by a simple, yet unfulfilled existence with my boyfriend Peter. We started our relationship back in college, a connection born more out of comfort than a fiery romantic saga. Our frequent quarrels usually revolved around Peter's lack of future plans or his endless video game sessions that stretched into the early morning, leaving me to sleep alone. It seemed we were perpetually circling a crucial conversation about our future together, yet we never truly addressed it. Our bond lacked the effort it once had. Caring for each other was there, but the zeal to make it thrive had faded. In stark contrast, my parents, Amy and Harold, who had been married for over 3 decades, still shared tender looks and inside jokes. Their enduring affection was my benchmark for love, something I doubted I'd find with Peter. One evening, as Peter and I argued over something as trivial as the laundry he had neglected again, my frustration reached its peak. "Can't you just do one thing you say you're going to?" I demanded, my voice heavy with irritation. "It's just laundry, Alexis. It'll get done eventually," he responded, barely glancing away from his screen. The arguments dwindled as they often did, without us truly tackling the root of our problems. Later that night, I was in the back seat of my parents' car, enveloped by the warmth of their conversation, a stark contrast to the cold tension between Peter and me. They were celebrating another birthday for my mom, and their happiness was infectious. Then, suddenly, the world shifted dramatically. The blinding headlights and the catastrophic sound of colliding metal led to darkness. When I regained consciousness, I was in the sterile environment of a hospital, with the continuous beeping of a heart monitor and a chilling sense of dread. The doctors delivered their news with clinical detachment. My parents had not survived the crash, and there was a chance my legs would no longer function. That grim revelation hit me hard, leaving me feeling profoundly alone. Peter, the same person I had bickered with hours before, now seemed like my sole link to the life I once knew, where laundry was my biggest concern. As I grappled with the loss of my parents and the daunting possibility of paralysis, despair began to set in. The future, once a field ripe with potential, now seemed desolate. During my hospital stay, surrounded by the relentless white walls and suffocating silence, Peter eventually came to visit, accompanied by his parents, Deborah and Raymond, who stood by the door, embodying awkward sympathy. Peter sat by my bed, took my hand, and began to speak in a hushed tone, a marked change from his usual demeanor. "Hey, Alexis," he started. "I've been thinking, a lot actually, about us." His eyes met mine, filled with a depth of emotion that was unfamiliar. "All of this has shown me how short life really is," he continued. I wanted to respond, to ask what all of this meant for us, but words failed me. His next words lingered in the charged air. "I don't want to wait for the perfect moment anymore." "Because it might never come," Peter continued, squeezing my hand. "What I'm trying to say is, will you marry me, Alexis?" His proposal lingered in the air, unexpected and heavy. At that moment, I searched his face, looking for traces of the impulsive Peter I knew so well, the one who often acted first and thought later. But instead, I saw only his sincerity. Deborah, his mother, stepped closer, her hands neatly clasped. "We want you to be a part of our family, Alexis. We'll take care of you," she said warmly. "And it's not out of pity," Raymond chimed in quickly. "It's because we love you, and we want to support Peter in taking this step." Stunned, I found myself grappling with their words. This was a lifeline, unexpected and perhaps a bit impulsive, but a lifeline nonetheless. Looking at Peter, I saw him not just as my sometimes immature boyfriend, but as a man stepping up in the most uncertain time of our lives. "Peter," my voice faltered as I tried to organize my swirling thoughts. "It's okay, Alexis. You don't have to decide right now," he said gently, his thumb soothingly rubbing the back of my hand. "I just wanted you to know how I feel." Thinking of my parents and the unconditional love and support they had always provided, I wondered if this was what they would have wanted for me. To be loved and cared for, no matter the circumstances. Peter, I don't know what the future holds for me, for us, but yes, I finally replied, the word coming out stronger than I felt. Yes, I'll marry you. A genuine smile spread across Peter's face, the first in days. Deborah let out a soft sob, covering her mouth with her hand, and even Raymond's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Moving into my parents' house with Peter was supposed to mark a new beginning, a fresh chapter. The house, now too large for just one, was filled with echoes of my parents. I had hoped Peter's presence would help fill the void, but instead it served as a reminder of what was lost, not what was gained. In the beginning, Peter was attentive, constantly ensuring I had everything I needed within reach. However, as days turned into weeks, the facade of the attentive husband began to fade. Peter increasingly retreated to his computer, his headphones a barrier between us. One evening, as I wheeled into the kitchen, I found him absorbed in his screen. Peter, have you thought about looking for a new job? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. The insurance won't cover everything, and the bills are starting to pile up. He didn't turn away from his screen. I told you, Alexis, taking care of you is my job now. But I can take care of myself during the day, I countered, a twinge of frustration in my voice. You don't need to be here all the time. Finally, he faced me, irritation mixed with a hint of something else I couldn't decipher in his expression. What do you want from me, Alexis? I'm here, aren't I? I was taken aback by his tone. Being physically here isn't the same as being present, Peter. I need a partner, not just a roommate. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile. You know what, Alexis? Maybe I need more than this, too. Maybe I wasn't cut out to be a nurse, he snapped, his words cutting deep. I watched as Peter stormed out, the door slamming shut behind him. The sudden quiet of the kitchen enveloped me, the echo of his departure leaving a stark emptiness that seemed to fill the room. I wasn't just alone, I was profoundly lonely. That night, as I lay in bed gazing at the ceiling, my thoughts circled back to our brief honeymoon period that had faded as swiftly as it started. The vows we had exchanged now felt like relics of another era. The Peter who had once earnestly promised to stand by me in sickness and in health now felt like a distant figure. As the weeks passed, Peter's absences became more frequent, his excuses increasingly feeble. His time was either spent with friends or immersed in a digital world that had no place for me. I felt like an unintended burden in his life, one he hadn't planned for. On a particularly hard day, when the pain was more acute and the house felt more like a tomb than a home, I heard the front door. "Is that you?" I called out, hoping it was Peter. "Yeah, it's me," his distant reply came. "Just grabbing a few things, then I'm heading out again." I maneuvered my wheelchair to the hallway, watching him search for his keys. "Going out with friends?" I asked, trying to hide the disappointment in my voice. He paused, keys in hand, and sighed. "Alexis, I need some space, okay? It's not easy for me either." I nodded, fighting back tears. "I know, I just thought maybe we could spend some time together like we used to." He shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "Maybe when things settle down a bit. I gotta go." With each passing day, the house grew emptier, a vast expanse filled with silence and the ghost of happier times. It wasn't just Peter's absence or the quiet that followed my parents' voices. It was the small, familiar things that began to disappear. A vase my mother cherished, a silver frame that held a family photo, and a painting that once adorned the hallway. I first noticed it while trying to distract myself with old memories. Wheeling into the living room, intending to look through photo albums, my eyes caught a bare patch on the wall where the painting had hung. Confusion furrowed my brow. "Peter?" I called out, unsure of when he had last been home. There was no answer, and the emptiness of the house seemed to echo my call. That evening, when Peter returned, I asked him, "Have you seen the landscape painting that used to be in the hallway?" He barely glanced up from his phone. "Oh, that old thing? Yeah, it was getting dusty, and I figured we could use the space for something else." Something about his casual dismissal unsettled me. "But it was my mom's favorite," I said, a tremor of unease in my voice. He shrugged, his attention still divided. "We can get another painting, Alexis. It's no big deal." But it was a big deal. The next items to go missing were unmistakably significant, things that had been in my family for years. One afternoon, I caught Deborah, Peter's mom, in the act. She was bustling around the living room with a large black garbage bag. "Deborah, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharp with alarm. She jumped, a guilty flush coloring her neck. "Oh, just some spring cleaning, dear. This place is cluttered with so many old things." "But those are my things," I protested, my heart rate accelerating. There, she cooed, her voice sickly sweet. "We're just making things nicer for you. You'll thank us later." From then on, I watched Deborah closely every time she visited, but her methods of taking things became more subtle and more calculated. Whenever I confronted her or Peter about it, they would assure me it was all for my benefit, trying to soothe my concerns with promises that they were looking out for me. One night, as I lay in bed beside Peter, who was absorbed in his phone, a routine that had become all too common, I decided to address it directly. "Peter, your parents have been taking things from the house. My things." He barely glanced up. "Mom's just trying to help, you know. She's good at organizing." "Help?" I repeated, my voice tinged with disbelief. "By taking my parents' belongings?" He sighed, finally setting his phone aside and turning to face me. "Look, Alexis, they think we should be moving forward, not clinging to the past. They're just trying to help lighten your load." The frustration and violation I felt were overwhelming, but I was too exhausted to fight. I felt defeated, my voice a mere whisper. "This isn't what I want." Peter reached out and patted my hand, a gesture that felt condescending rather than consoling. "Try to get some sleep, Alexis. Things will look better in the morning." Unable to bear the situation alone any longer, I confided in my closest friend Bella, who was also my massage therapist and had been aiding in my rehabilitation. Her visits were a rare comfort in my increasingly strained life. "Bella, things are going missing around the house," I confided during one of her sessions, "and I can't shake the feeling that Peter and his parents are behind it." Bella paused, her hands freezing on my shoulders. "Have you talked to Peter about this?" "I have, but he just brushes it off and says his parents are decluttering to help us." I let out a bitter laugh. "But it's only my family's things that are disappearing." Concern creased Bella's forehead. "That doesn't sound right, Alexis. Do you want me to do something? Maybe come by more often. Keep an eye out." A spark of hope flickered within me. "Could you maybe help me set up some sort of camera or something to record what's going on when I'm not in the room?" With a determined nod, Bella agreed. "I'll bring something over tomorrow. We'll get to the bottom of this." True to her word, Bella returned the next day with several discreet recording devices, which we placed strategically around the house. The situation felt surreal, like something out of a spy movie, and under different circumstances I might have found the absurdity amusing. A few days later, Bella came back with the recordings, and we sat down to listen together. The casual conversation of Peter and his parents filled the room, chilling me to the core. "And once we get her committed, the house and everything in it will be ours," Peter's voice declared, cold and calculating. "Yeah, the place will sell for a fortune and all those antiques. Pure profit," his mother added greedily. "We just need to make sure Alexis doesn't catch on before we have everything in place," his father said. Tears streamed down my face as I listened to their betrayal. These people, who had promised to care for me, to be my family, were plotting against me. Bella gripped my hand tightly, anger lacing her voice. "We have to do something, Alexis." I wiped my eyes, the sorrow quickly transforming into a steely resolve. "We will. I'm not going to let them get away with this." The morning after listening to the recordings, I tried to act normal, but inside I was preparing for what needed to be done next. Every interaction, every smile from them now seemed tainted with deceit. It was during breakfast, a time usually accompanied by the gentle hum of city life through the open window, that I sensed something was amiss. The usual background noise was conspicuously absent. I wheeled myself over to the window to investigate, only to discover that the ramps which facilitated my access to the garden had vanished. "Peter!" I called out, panic sharpening my voice. "Where are the ramps?" He entered the room, feigning confusion. "The ramps? Oh, they were looking a bit worn. Thought they needed fixing." I stared at him, the man I thought I knew. "And you didn't think to tell me?" "How am I supposed to get around?" His gaze shifted away, evasive. "I just thought you'd be safer inside for now, until we get new ones." The room seemed to spin, and it wasn't because of my injury. Safer or trapped? The words slipped out before I could stop them. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked away, leaving me simmering in a mix of anger and helplessness. Later, when I confronted Deborah about it, her response was coated in a syrupy, insincere concern. "We're just looking out for you, dear. We wouldn't want you to have an accident," she said, her hand lightly touching my shoulder. I recoiled from her touch, the sting of their deceit palpable. "I didn't realize needing ramps qualified as a hazard," I retorted, my voice steady though I was trembling inside. Deborah's eyes flickered with a hint of hardness before she smoothed her expression. "We're just trying to help, Alexis. It's for the best." That night, as I lay in the oppressive darkness, Peter was out again, likely numbing his guilt with cheap diversions. I reached for my phone, its screen a dim light in the gloom, and called Bella, using the emergency number she had given me. "Bella," I whispered when she answered, "they've removed the ramp. I'm literally trapped in my own home." Her voice was a solid anchor in the storm. "Hang tight, Alexis. I'm going to make some calls. We're going to sort this out." The next day, I was in the kitchen when the doorbell rang. My heart pounded as I maneuvered towards the entrance. It was Bella, accompanied by a man and woman dressed in crisp suits, their expressions serious. They were representatives from a local disability rights organization, here to evaluate my living situation. Alongside them was my lawyer, Mr. Mason, clutching a leather briefcase. "Alexis, we're here to make things right," Bella declared, her determination echoing my resolve. Mr. Mason stepped forward. "We need to establish the facts first, Alexis. I'll need to see the house and check against the inventory of your parents' belongings." As we moved through the house, the representatives took detailed notes, their expressions reflecting clear disapproval at the absence of the ramps and the blatant disregard for my welfare. Peter walked in amid the commotion, surprise etched across his face. "Alexis, what's going on? Who are these people?" he stammered. I met his gaze squarely, letting the full weight of my resolve press upon him. "I'm taking back control, Peter. This is my lawyer, and these are advocates for people with disabilities. They're here to ensure my home is safe and accessible." Deborah and Raymond entered the room, their initial confusion quickly turning into fear as they grasped the gravity of the situation. "Alexis, darling, what is this about?" Deborah's voice shook. "It's about my rights, my home, and the truth," I responded, my voice calm but firm despite the turmoil inside me. Mr. Mason, my lawyer, opened his briefcase and began pulling out documents and photographs. "We have detailed records of all items bequeathed to Mrs. Harper," he explained, laying out the evidence. "It appears several are missing." Raymond's face drained of color. "Alexis, I'm sure this is all just a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," I countered, memories of the recordings provided by Bella reinforcing my resolve. "And I have more than just missing items to discuss." Peter's parents exchanged worried glances, their facade as caring in-laws starting to crumble. Peter stood silently, the reality of the situation slowly sinking in. Bella stepped closer to me, her presence reassuring. "We also have evidence of conversations you've had regarding Alexis's property and well-being," she added, her voice steady and resolute. The advocates from the Disability Service spoke up next. Removing access to the ramps is a direct violation of Mrs. Harper's rights. We will be taking action." As Mr. Mason presented the evidence of their theft and their scheming regarding my future, I saw from an external perspective the trap I had been caught in. But now the tables had turned. I was no longer just a victim in their game. I was dictating the play. Peter eventually found his voice. "Alexis, I can explain." I shook my head. "Save it, Peter. I've heard enough." Deborah began to sob, and Raymond put an arm around her, but their display of distress found no sympathy from me, given the depth of their deceit. The day of the trial marked the culmination of all I had endured. The courtroom was stark, the air thick with tension. Peter and his parents sat on one side, their demeanors far removed from the family that had once promised to care for me. I sat on the other, with Bella by my side and Mr. Mason ready with his briefcase full of evidence. As the proceedings began, the judge surveyed the courtroom, his gaze lingering on me momentarily. "We are here to examine the evidence regarding the allegations of theft," he stated, setting the stage for what would be a pivotal confrontation. "And the premeditated exploitation of Alexis Harper," the judge declared, setting a solemn tone for the proceedings. Mr. Mason then presented the recordings, the glaring inventory discrepancies, and compelling testimonies from the disability advocates. The evidence was unequivocal, leaving Peter and his family with nowhere to hide from their deceit. Deborah's quiet sobs provided a sorrowful backdrop to the disintegration of their plans. "We never meant for things to go this far," she whispered during her turn to testify, her voice laden with regret. The judge's response was stern and unyielding. "You took advantage of a vulnerable person. There's absolutely no excuse for your actions." When Peter stood to speak, his voice was barely audible. "I'm sorry, Alexis. I never wanted to hurt you." I looked at him, our shared history flashing before my eyes in painful clarity. "Sorry isn't enough, Peter. You chose this path." The judge's gavel struck with finality, marking the end of the life I had once known with Peter. They were found guilty, ordered to make reparations, and prohibited from any further contact with me. It was a profound relief, but also the beginning of a new chapter. With the unwavering support of Bella and a dedicated rehabilitation team, I began the slow process of physical therapy. Each movement was a hard-fought victory, each step a testament to my determination. Gradually, my legs, which had once seemed devoid of life, began to tingle with newfound strength. One day, as I managed to stand with the help of parallel bars, Bella's encouragement filled the room. "Look at you, Alexis. You're doing it." Her enthusiasm was infectious, and a genuine smile spread across my face. "I am, aren't I?" I responded, joy welling up from a place within me I feared had been irreparably shattered. And so, I moved forward, one day at a time. The house, once a mausoleum of my past traumas, was gradually transformed back into a true home, a sanctuary where I healed and grew stronger. It became a place not of sorrow and betrayal, but of renewal and resilience, a testament to the power of reclaiming one's life and dignity.